Welcome to the Executive Eye by DRI, your lens into the world of executive leadership. Here, we bring you sharp insights, clear perspectives, and focused discussions on the trends shaping the future of business. Join us as we explore what's in view for today's leaders and tomorrow's innovators.
Welcome to the Executive Eye, the podcast where we explore leadership insights and what it takes to be a true expert in today's marketplace. I'm Matthew Cohen, partner and practice leader of clean tech and sustainability here at Direct Recruiters, and I am here with Marty Shapan, my fellow partner. Marty, love for you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Marty Shapan, been with Kaye Bassman, which is part of the Starfish family of companies. Been here for 23 years. They keep letting me back in the door, I guess. So I'll keep showing up. I been doing the construction and real estate search business, primarily the Western U.S. for that 23-year period. And I guess today's episode that Matt has been kind enough to ask me to join him on is about market mastery. And what it really means, how to achieve it, and why it's key to standing out in your industry. We've both got a lot to share on this one, so I guess we'll dive in. Matt, when I think of the phrase market mastery, I have a lot of things that come to mind. What kind of comes to mind when you hear that phrase?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. I'm excited that you're here with me because this is my favorite topic of all the things that we do. When it comes to market mastery, I really look at it as a mindset. So I think one, it's the relentless pursuit of knowledge in whatever industry you're in. So constantly having a drive to learn more, to become better, to understand more about the world around you in whatever industry that you focus on. And the other thing that I think of when it comes to market mastery, it's the mindset of having an obsession with giving the client exactly what they're asking for. So whatever, you don't have to know everything, but whatever you need to do, whatever resources, whatever help, whatever time it takes to get to a point where the client is getting exactly the candidate that they wanted, that the experience that they needed, there's no ambiguity, they want to speak with that person. Whatever that process takes to get to that point, to me, that's market mastery, is being able to provide that solution for them. So that's the mindset is really where I think of market mastery.
Yeah, I think that's a large part of it, just being able to know exactly it's like what is a good candidate in that space and being able to have insight into what the client decides that is important to them and being able to provide that solution to them. And that's what I believe is a huge key part of it and everything. So let me ask you this, was there a moment where things kind of clicked and you kind of knew that like mastering your niche or becoming a subject matter expert in your niche was like a key to standing out?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, well, one, when I started to get repeat business from the clients that my placements were being successful. So there's that one thing. Whenever you see someone having success and they come back to you for more, then you kind of, it's validated that you're bringing them the right people. But where it really clicked for me is when I started to understand the time that was wasted by not being able to bring the clients what they were asking for. So, I can handle counter offers. I can handle, people who stop searches. I can handle all that. My biggest pet peeve is when I bring candidates into the search process and they're not the right fit for the role. And so whatever I needed to do to get to that point, that's where I really tried to master. And so I'm a big fan of less is more. So when I got to the mindset of I'm going to give you exactly what you are looking for. And if we're not at that point, you need the feedback. When I started to hone in on that process, that's where I clicked. And then I just did not look back. And that's really where I focus. So, and I'm sure that you deal with the same thing. So when in your career, what were some of the early steps that you took to kind of build that knowledge so you can be in the same space where you are bringing the type of candidates that, your clients are asking for?
So I think what was interesting for me when I first got started is I joined an existing team, but it was a one-man team. And so I'm going to tell a bit of a story to kind of answer this. I joined a one-man team. That guy had only been with Kaye Bassman a year, and specifically in Northern California doing the commercial construction space. So the advantage was he'd been there a year. The disadvantage was his database wasn't really built out. And so I looked at that as like, what a golden opportunity. And people are like, what do you mean? Like, what? And we didn't have like, oh, this is person's like a researcher or like a person that enters all the names for you. For me, what really made things click was, okay, in Northern California, I was like, how many commercial general, what's our primary audience that we're trying to hit? And he was like, we call nothing but commercial general contractors. And so I said, define that for me. So he told me like what a commercial general contractor was in our space and how we defined it, how he defined it. And so from there, I was like, okay, I want to know who are all of the commercial general contracting firms. And then I broke it down for me, I broke it down by the phone area codes. Well, here's how many are in the 415 area code, right? Then here's how many are in the 650 area code. Then if you go over to the East Bay in the 510 area code and the 925, and then if you go to the South Bay and the Peninsula, it's the 408 area code, right? And 650. So I was like in 707 for the North Bay. And I would define it by that. And I'd go look and say, which are all of the general contractors there? And then what I figured out was, well, each of them do different stuff. Some of them do interiors, some of them do ground up, some of them specialize in this type of work, some of them do schools, some of them do hospitals, some of them do uh, data centers, right? And so then I was like, well, I better break this down into total addressable market list is kind of the way I looked at it. So that way, when I was calling on a candidate, or if I had a search come up, the guy I worked for would say, hey, I need a hospital guy. Well, where do you need a hospital? We need a hospital guy in the North Bay. So I'm like, okay, so in 707, who are all of the people in 707 that specifically would build hospitals? So here's all the companies that build hospitals. And then here's all the people in that company that could possibly be a project manager building a hospital because they work at that company. So I knew that I had a definitive, what I liked about it is I could project manage the search then. So I knew I had a definitive start and end to the search. Well, Mr. Client, there's exactly 100 people in that in that geography within a 20-mile radius of your project site. That way, a search couldn't go on forever, right? I would have a start and an end, and I really liked that. And the other thing about it that I think helped me, and where I feel like it really clicked, was uh, because there weren't all the names entered in the database. And at that time, if you go back when I started, 2002, Reid Hoffman hadn't quite been fired yet from his job and gone into his living room to start LinkedIn. And I don't think that LinkedIn even had but 1.6 million users on LinkedIn until I want to say like 2004. So he started it in 2002. It didn't launch until 2003. And he only had 1.6 million users on it in 2004. And if you look at the overall US workforce, like today, like how many people are in the US workforce, it's 170 million people, right? So that means only 1.6 of, let's say back then it was still 170 million people in the US workforce, only 1.6 million, right? So it was like, and those are early adopters at that point, right? And so to me, I couldn't rely on it. It wasn't something that I even really thought of. So to me, I was old school. I had a legal pad, a pen, and a phone with the keypad where you would dial by like the letter. I'd hit the number one or whatever, and that would give me all the A names, and I'd spell them out phonetically for the company directory, and then so on and so on. And next thing you know, I had a list of phonetically spelled names out on a legal pad from a company, and I'd have to call back into the company and get someone on the phone and play stupid in order to like figure out like what each person did and what their title was. And then once I got in a legal pad, I wanted to go back and enter it in the database, which I would spend Saturdays doing. Well, by the end of my first year, I had entered like 3,500 names into the database myself, not an admin, not like a high connects person or a Solvo or an offshore person or some researcher, me. And by breaking down the market like that and entering all of those names, I think it was like a memorization exercise. And that's when it just clicked with me. because
Sure.
I sounded like somebody when I was on the phone with those people. I sounded like someone who lived there. I sounded like someone who like worked in their industry because I was able to like recall from my mind from doing all of that manual quote unquote labor myself. I'd be able to go, oh, that so and so works over here, and this person here, and that person there, and the next thing you know, I have like people would be like I had credibility with it. It's created that credibility, and it made people talk to me that otherwise wouldn't talk to me. So long story, but that kind of gives you the when it clicked type of situation for
Sure.
me.
So what I'd be curious about is, you know, you did a great job of really developing a network in the industry that you're in when you started. For someone who's coming into a new industry when they're entering a niche, what would advice you would give to someone to gain the right knowledge about the industry to becoming an expert really fast so they can be credible on the phone?
So one thing I would do, and I think this is where I learned to do that, those things, those steps that I just listed out, or things that I did that I didn't even realize what I was doing, but it just kind of, I just kind of was following my instincts a little bit. I would say I would go to like whatever the major publication is for your industry, right? Like what's a major publication for your industry where they list out like, hey, here's the top 20 companies in that industry. Like, what is it, man? Like, what is that publication in your industry?
Yeah, I mean, like, Green Tech Media is a big one that we.
So, like, if you were to come and say, hey, I'd say, okay, what's the major publication? It's Green Tech Media. I said, do they have a list that says, here's the top 50 companies, right? And who of those top 50, like, okay, these are the really, really big ones. So I might not call the really, really big ones to begin with. But what I might do is I drop down to like anybody outside of the top 10. And I maybe take like 10 through 50 or 11 through 50. And I'd figure out in those companies who are the big titles that I need to call and get to know. And I would just jump on the phone and I'd have scripted out like my questions for those people. And what I would want to know from them is what is something of value that I could bring you? Who are the major people in the industry that you would say, like, hey, if I was to need to get to know people and I wanted to build myself up over the course of time, who would be the key players and stakeholders in this niche that I would need to develop relationships with? And then what are the organizations that those people are those folks are members of? What are the conventions or the trade shows or those types of things that people attend, right? And if I was to call you back about somebody, Mr. Person I have on the phone, at some point in time now or in the future, what's something I could bring you to help you in your career today? And that would make you go, okay, I would drop my pen and go, dude, that's a really cool thing. I would want to know about it for me personally, right? In order to consider making a move, so that I'm asking them instantly, hey, what can I add? How would I add value for you from your career? And then number two, I would ask them, what is a type of person that if I was to bring that type of person to you or anybody else in your company, what are the types of positions that are hard for you guys to fill that would make me stand out if I was able to bring one of those people? And what do those people look like? And how would I know if I've got a good one? In other words, I would be vulnerable with people on the phone, which is what I did. Is I would tell them I was new, and I would tell them I want to learn information. Where would you go if you were me to learn that information? And what information would you think would be valuable for me to know in order to be a great resource for you, Mr. Person on the other end of the phone? But I'd start with industry publications. I'm not talking about like I'm going to spend hours and hours reading articles. What I found for me was I did that in my off time, meaning like not my prime time during the day. But what I would focus on is I want to get on the phone and I want to bang through as many of these calls, and I want to try to talk to 15 to 20 people a day was my goal. And if I do that every day, eventually I'll have a lot of information that I've gathered, which will give me insight. Because to me, anybody can get insight from reading an article in an industry publication, because most people in your industry are going to read it. But what they won't be able to get is that insight and information that you can get by connecting with another human being in a conversation and being able to find out things that are happening in their company specifically, to that person specifically. And then number three, in the industry from that person's perspective. Kind of like a Venn, if you can visualize a Venn diagram with those three interlocking circles I just described. And that's kind of the way I visualized it. And when it really hit for me in that situation was my like 2 or 3 days into doing this. I ended up on the phone making an outbound call to a guy, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was following my script that my search consultant gave me, and I remember this guy. I'll never forget him. His name is Rick Alpers, and Rick Alpers worked for Say Construction. I'll never forget it. And I called him and to recruit him for to try to get to talk to him, and that guy hung up on me in 5 seconds flat. 5 seconds flat because he goes, I don't talk to green salespeople or recruiters. Uh, uh, and then he inserted some unchurch-like and unsynagogue-like words into the sentence and then hung up the phone. Well, I was in a room of people because we all sat together in this thing called the energy room at KBIC when you first started. So think of like 10, 15 people in a room, shoulder to shoulder, like a boiler room style thing. And the trainer sits in the middle, right? Which was Sandy Bassman, which was Bob Bassman's wife, one of the founder of our firm. And she would listen to all of our calls. I stood right up. I called that guy back, Rick Alpers, and I inserted some, I won't recommend this to people, but like some unrabbinical, unpriest-like words into the call that don't talk to me like that. You don't know if I'm going to be any good. And that guy goes, you're right. I don't know. What can I do to help you? He was so impressed that I called him right back. But here's what he said. He said, here's the deal. I'm the BD guy, so I'm going to help you because I'm a BD guy. And clearly you're trying to do BD. Here's who you need to know. You need to know this guy, and this guy if you're going to work the San Francisco Bay Area. You need to know these 5 companies. You need to know the leadership in these 5 companies. Here's their names. You need to figure out how to get in touch with them. And I was like, that's it. The more I know specifically in a smaller niche, the greater I'm able to have insight, the greater insight I'm able to have, I'm able to provide good advice. The better advice I'm able to give, the more people look at me as a consultant and not as someone that's just out to get a resume and make a placement, but they look at me as like a trusted advisor. So that's kind of the way that I looked at things, but it clicked, it really hit for me with that phone call, from that guy. And that's one of the ways that I feel like I became an expert, but it was really getting on the phone and having those phone calls and not being afraid to take the punches to the face, right?
Sure. And then once you got to that point where you gained that niche expertise, why do you think some of the leaders some leaders thrive because of the expertise that you have, while others maybe that you compete with, or even ones that you've worked with, while they've struggled to differentiate themselves? What's the difference between really having niche expertise and maybe pretending or maybe not having the full knowledge that you think you do?
I think it's because you've got to know how to leverage the information. You've got to know how to use it and tee it up. And I'll give an example from later in my career of of uh, of of how this plays out. Because working in a specific niche, working in a specific geography, what happens is you find out like everything that's going on if you're on the phone enough, talking to enough of the right people. And what I found was this company was going to close down one of their offices. And I found out that they were going to be shutting it down because somebody told me that in a call. And so I immediately, from that phone call, found who was the regional vice president, which I knew the guy, I knew who the guy was. And I picked up the phone and I called him instantly. And I was like, hey, Steve, this is Marty with Kaye Bassman. I've talked to you in the past, but it's been a while, so you might not remember me. But I understand that right now you're making some significant changes to the company in the Pacific Northwest and potentially shutting down your Seattle office. But I also have heard that you're going to be changing your strategy and going after life sciences projects and would like someone from that background. I'd like to talk to you about that and how I might be able to help. Let me put it this way. By being able to have that knowledge, leveraging it from one phone call to the next one, like that guy called me back like that because I wasn't just calling him like generically. I had insight into something specifically going on. He called me back. He's like, Marty, like that news is like not even 24 hours old. Like it's a few hours old. How do you even know about that? I said, well, I can't really tell you that, but other than like, this is what I do. And lots of people talk to me and I'd like to find out how I can help you in the change that you're making and help you with identifying someone that might be able to help you with the life sciences work that you'd like to attract. And that guy connected me with the president of this company, and our Texas team to this day still works with that firm and has turned out to be a great account for those guys and everything. So I feel like it's taking that information and being able to use that intelligence. I think of it like I'm in the construction CIA or something, or the construction Mossad. Is I want to take the nuggets of information and leverage it into a way to influence my next phone call, right? I hear a company, hey, who's laying people off? Oh, these companies laying people off. Why are they laying people off? Well, they just lost these 3 projects. Well, I know that now. So when I leave a voicemail, my voicemail is much more powerful instead of being generic, right? That's the thing I think that separates people is they're afraid to maybe ask those questions, or they're afraid to like use that information in a way that will benefit them and potentially benefit the person that you're calling, that candidate that you're reaching out to and everything. So let me ask you, I'm curious about your opinion on this and like how you've leveraged that same information or that in that same way.
Yeah, and so the question that I always come up with is like, how do I take the market knowledge and then use it to like kind of be that trusted advisor, right? Because there's a difference between just knowing your market and kind of providing a service, and and then being really that advisor that people know you for an industry. And so where I see the differentiation is being able to really make deposits into your industry that aren't recruiting related. So you mentioned trade shows earlier. Trade shows are huge. I love them. I'm a big fan of putting time and energy and sometimes money, if you have to, into going to trade shows. I've gone to the same one. I've gone to a few different ones, but there's one that I go to every single year in January. I think I've done 10 of them, and I meet with the same people, and then I try to find new people to meet with. And so the people that I meet with every year, they know like they've really, it's solidified that I'm in this space, right? It's one thing to go one time and never come again, or say that you do something, but to show my face every single year, talk to people, see the products, ask about the products, ask about the services they offer, that's huge. And I think anything you can do to make deposits in your industry that aren't recruiting related is good. That maybe it's not a trade show. Like for example, I'm not a stranger to the podcast world. I have my own podcast called Decarbonization Disruptors. You can get it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And the podcast that I do is usually with CEOs or founders of companies, and very rarely is any of the conversation in my podcast episodes about recruiting. It's all about them, their company, how they got to where they are, the products that they serve, their customers, the challenges in the industry. I only focus there, and by doing that, I think there's a extra element of being a trusted advisor by allowing them to see me as a part of their industry rather than trying to sell into it. And so if you can differentiate yourself, whether it's, I mean, we live in a content driven world, right? So whether it's, you can do a podcast, but you can, provide surveys on LinkedIn, you can provide content, you can share articles, you can comment on articles, you can share your insight based on a recent merger and acquisition, whatever it is, the more deposits that you make into an industry separates you to be that trusted advisor, not just a service provider.
And I think it's the branding. That's the thing. You totally just hit on it. It's like being in that niche. And like you said, a big overlooked piece of market mastery to me is that personal branding and elevating yourself like that by just, like you said, showing up. You're there, and you're there to be in the industry, talking about the industry, learning about the industry, being naturally inquisitive, being a sponge And to me, what that shows people is I'm not just in this because I make placements. I'm in this because I care about the industry. I want to give back. And not only do I want to do that, I want to be part of the larger ecosystem in the industry that I'm a part, that I want to be, make my living in. And so I just happen to be on the talent acquisition side of it. You happen to be on the actual delivery of the product to the end user, but I help by providing talent that helps your company provide its products. And but you're putting yourself, elevating yourself from just um, a resume pusher. I hate
Sure.
I'm trying to think of a nice way to put it here, but
You make it not transactional, right?
yes, that's
Yeah.
right. That's the word I was looking for. Not yeah. And now you're about building relationships with people in the industry to help grow the business and elevate the industry and help companies become better and help candidates with elevating their careers. So I think that's really a great point that you just made. What's the connection to you between like knowing your market and being seen as a trusted advisor and not just a service provider? You kind of just touched on it, but like, I mean, I think that like, is there anything else besides the things you just listed off, or things that you think, how people view you by being a market master, that you think have helped you with advancing your career, or being, making it more enjoyable or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think, really living your industry is important. And, the big thing for me is, I always think about how do I build trust and credibility, right? And so the way that I do that with clients where I'm showing my market knowledge, but also making sure they understand that I'm credible is data, and showing your work is important, right? And so, when, especially if I'm trying to get a really good search, one of the first things I'll do is I'll share, like, let's say LinkedIn profiles or maybe candidates that I've worked with previously. I'll just send them a list. Hey, here's the people that I think would be a great fit for this role based on
Okay.
what we talked about. And, let me know if this is kind of, if we're on the right track. And if so, this is who we'd be reaching out to. Or, hey, based on what you discussed with me, here's the salary ranges of where we think the candidates that you're looking for could get to, or these are the locations where we think you have the best chance. I'll give you an example. I had actually a company out of Brazil reach out to me recently, and their idea was to build out a team of people both in the US, but they also wanted people based in Brazil to travel to the US regularly. And
Wow.
it works out because actually I have a employee who's based in Brazil, and so she would help with that. But their idea was to have Brazilian expats travel to the United States on a regular basis. And what we discussed with them after we showed them some data was that may not be the best. It's not the most cost-effective way of doing it, right? You could find good candidates in the U.S. because if you decide to use Brazilian candidates to come here, you got to pay lawyers, you got to pay visa fees, you got to find them housing. There's so many ancillary costs that go into that, and they weren't exactly expecting that because they had this kind of idea in their mind, but they're not familiar with the U.S. market, and so we gave them a bunch of data. We showed them some example candidates. And I think we're on the cusp of getting like a few different retained searches from them because we shared our knowledge of that. Then they weren't, and I don't think they were expecting that. I think they just, okay, this is your plan, great, and we'll just execute it. But we really gave some detailed feedback. And I think that builds trust and credibility because then we can show that we're, like you said, that trusted advisor and not just a service provider.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. I think that a lot of times people, they take for granted the fact that, like, you know, they think, well, we just provide resumes and we just provide candidates and just that's it. But like, if you're really in a niche and you really know your niche, you're able to provide a lot of more rounded, robust information that can help clients in the decision making process. And I think that what you just described, is really a great way to illustrate that. So I think that's good. So how, when you're thinking about showcasing your expertise and, also staying, uh, I guess, approachable and or curious? Like, what's the line between that? Like,
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't. You don't want to force information down people's throats, right? You want to understand that they're the client, and you have to be able to give them the right information to give them best decision. That's really what I tell people is I'm going to, I specialize in this industry. Let me give you some data. Let me show you what we believe is the best options for this. And then you guys make a decision. I'm actually a big fan of, people don't like to be sold, but they love to buy things, right? So is the way you stay approachable is by giving people options. So one of my mentors here, Ryan Lang, is a big fan of that. He taught me a lot about kind of option selling, which is, hey,
okay.
here's a candidate who is within your salary range. Here's a candidate that's quite above it. Here's a candidate below. Like, where do you think you want to go with this? Or here's different salary ranges. Here's different types of expertise that you said you wanted. You make it the decision. Here's offer A, offer B, offer C. Like, where do you think is the best option here? And I think so you can still showcase expertise, but not be pushy or forcing people to make a decision by just giving them the data and by showing them different options. I think that's the best way to stay approachable, because not only does it make you a trusted advisor and give you credibility, but it doesn't make you someone that is saying you have to do this. It's saying here's a range of options based on their expertise, and then you make the decision. And I think most of the time they make the decision that we want them to, but at the end it's their money and it's their decision. So I think giving that option selling is the best way to kind of stay approachable.
That's like that House Hunters show where I watch with my wife, where they go to Europe or some other foreign country and the couple wants to move from the US or something. And they show them like three houses on the show. I'm sure they showed them more, but like it comes down to three. And it's like this one costs X to Y, this one costs X, and this one, and then they, it's from different, and it's the same principle. It's like, I'm not making the decision for it. I'm just going to show you what's
Right.
available. And then based upon the market. But another step to that, which I think you mentioned earlier, is because you're in a niche and because you've learned that niche and become a subject matter expert, when you give those options, you're able to also probably say, look, in that space that you're looking for with this skill set, there's X amount of people. Of that X amount of people, there's this many that are within the geography in which you want that person. Of those people within that geography, there's just how many are interested in your role. And of those that are interested, here are the top three choices and what they make. In other words, you can really provide all that. So all you're doing is sharing the data, right? You're not you're not like, you got to, like you said, you got to do this. It's not like you're holding a gun to someone's head. It's more like, these are what the options are. Outside of these options, we would have to change our search strategy, which then might change some of the other parameters of the search. But based upon the information that you share with me and my knowing this niche and having identified it, here's the quantifiable metrics and data that I can share with you to help you in making your decision. Let me know what you would like to do and how you would like me to approach this based upon having this information.
Yeah, no, I mean it's great insight, and I think one of the things that I always try to do is like, how do I use? And I love to get your perspective on this, but like, how do I use market insights to lead conversations instead of just reacting to them? And I think what you hit on was correct, which is you got to show options. So if it means here's the last 5 placements we've made that are similar to yours, here was the salary range, here was the location, here was the type of background. Is if this is what you're looking for, this is what it would take, right? And I think
Right.
Showing that market insight is really valuable. Or you can even do, here are a list of candidates that we know in this space that we think would be interested in this, but here's all their information minus their name. Here's a
Right.
salary, here's a location, here's their expertise, here's in data on their recent successes. and they can make the decision at that point. And I think you hit it on the head. Like I'm surprised sometimes the gap between what a client is looking for and what's actually going to take to get that person on board. And you got to find a way to like fill that gap with data and insight. And the more you do that, you become a trusted advisor and grow credibility. I'd be curious from you is what you do to lead the conversation when it comes to that client interaction, so that you're not just reacting to them, you're really focusing on leading those insights.
Right. I think it comes down to asking the right questions and being able to be methodical in how you go about asking the questions, right? And I think it comes down to like really digging into, hey, tell me specifically like what type of individual you're looking for and why is it important to you, right? And tell me uh, if I was to call you back with this type of person, what would they need to tell me everything quantifiable that they would have to have and how you would measure those things so that I know exactly what I'm looking for when I'm getting on the phone to go hunt for it on your behalf. And so when I call you back, what do these people need to have that will make you want to open my email and not go, oh my God, another email from that guy. I want the opposite. I want it like when you see an email from me, Mr. Client, I want you to want to open it because you're like, that's what I need that. That guy just brought me something of value. What does that look like to you in that email? And what will make you make you move to action on it? Meaning like immediately give me 3 dates and times to set up an interview. If I can get the answer to that, from there, I can then tell them, okay, well, let me tell you to get that. Here's what I'm going to need from you, Mr. Client, right? And here's what I would need to do to go about getting that from you. And here's the steps that it would take. And let me share with you here's exactly how many companies are your competitors in that space. Within those companies, let me share with you now how many people are in that company doing the exact job that you want. And then also you can take it a step further and go, here's how many people that are one level below that person. Here's how many people are at that level, and here's how many people are a level above. So that would allow us to broaden the candidate pool based upon if you wanted to expand the criteria and maybe go higher, or if you're willing to take someone who's maybe not there yet, but has this maybe 8 out of the 10 things you're looking for. But here's the information that'll allow you to know what the search process needs to be and how I'm going to go about identifying. So what I usually do also is if it's a search that we're doing exclusively or retained, I will share with them, hey, here is a list of all of the target source companies in the market. Here is a list of all of the projects that are going on that I understand are similar to the type of project you're looking for in that same geography. So you know exactly how I'm going to go about doing this so they can see. And once again, I'm just trying to project manage the search because I don't want things to go on forever. But you have to have market insight and mastery to do that. But you won't get that if you don't take the time on the front end to do a good job on that search intake call or that initial business development call where you might start wading into that situation. But you've got to be able to script out the questions to get the information to be able to then share the right data within your niche to show the client like, hey man, here's the information to show you why I'm the person, in addition to why this is going to be a search that isn't infinite.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, what's interesting now as opposed to before when you talked about how, one of the ways that you got into your niche was listen to the phonetic versions of names. We've come a long way since then, right? Now we have like Chat GPT, for example. And this is something that I'm dealing with because I have a new employee who's been doing great. But every day she says, I asked Chat GPT this and this is what the answer was. And I'm like, all right, well, that's not wrong, but there's so many more levels, right? So now with ChatGPT, for example, and AI, everyone gets kind of a surface level info, and you can always sound like an expert. But what do you think really sets a market master apart from the surface level information that anybody can get now?
I'll go back to what I said earlier, and I actually saw this from another recruiter yesterday on LinkedIn that I follow, and it was like reading the gospel of the old school, probably a Gen X recruiter, right? And so what this guy said on there was it was being on the phone. He said everybody in the world is using Hire Easy, Zoom Info, LinkedIn InMails, email drip marketing campaigns, emails, text messages, uh, you know, Chat GPT, DeepSeek, like name a tech company, right? And they're using the tool. So I'm not saying not to use those tools, but what I am saying is, to your point, it's being on the phone. I really feel like nothing will ever beat the having the conversations on the phone live and trying to squeeze the orange, so to speak. I feel like that is the actual pattern interrupt of today's search industry, of going back to the old school Alexander Graham Bell invented thing, not the new technology, but the being on the phone, because not very often are people getting phone calls. And then having a conversation, you can find out more information that is not necessarily on the internet, that isn't necessarily something that everybody is that's going to be known to the general public. They're going to find out things that that person shares with you from meetings that they've been in their company, things that they've seen on the project that they're working on, hiring that's talked about when they go into their executive meetings and their strategic plan. That's not on the internet. You can't ask Chat GPT that information or DeepSeek. That information is on the phone. And and so to become a real market master, I feel you've got to be a phone master. If I look at any of the top recruiters in Starfish Partners, any of them, like you look at Michael Petrak, you look at Danny Meyerhoff, you look at Mike Silverstein, you look at Norm, you look at Nate Corville, any of these folks, I believe they're on the phone at least 3 hours a day, more often than not. And I think that they spend so much time on the phone having those conversations. I'd add like people like you and P-Track and I think Dan Miller and a couple others have podcasts. I think that also does the trick too, because once again, it's a conversation with someone in the industry about the industry. And the other thing you said earlier, which also ties into that, is it's showing up. How do people know you? You show up. What's one of the best ways to show up every day as a recruiter? On the phone. So when people hear from you over and over again, and you're calling and offering them insight from the calls that you've had, what happens? How do they view you? They view you as a subject matter expert. They look at you like you're what? E.F. Hutton or something, you know? Like you're the expert. Like they call you, they'll start calling you even if you're not going to place them, but they'll call you and say, "Hey, Matt, I've got a review coming up, and what are people getting for raises out there? What a great phone call to get!
Right.
That's a huge compliment. There's the ultimate compliment. They're not calling me to ask me to place them, which is a huge compliment. The two things that I look at as great compliments that show that I'm a market master is when I get a referral for someone saying, "Hey, Marty, I want to introduce you to so and so for either a search assignment, like another company that needs a person, and this person's referring me to them to help that company, or they're referring me to a friend, right, that's looking to make a job change." That means that they view me as a market master in my mind, because they're not just going to give that name just to anybody, right? Or if the person's calling me to ask my insights into, "Hey, I'm in this situation at work. I've got this raise and review coming up. I've got this, how do you think I should approach it? What information do you think would be pertinent for me to know going into it, so I know if it's in alignment with the rest of the industry?" Man, what a great testament to that person being a subject matter expert or a market master, in my opinion. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I always say, like, AI and ChatGPT is great, but at least in our lifetime, those tools will never be able to figure out if someone's going to take a counter offer. They'll never be able to figure out, at least for the moment, whether or not the level of someone's interest in a role or level of a hiring manager's interest in a candidate. Like there is no technology around that other than just the experience you have, like you said, of being on the phone. So yeah, I think we're safe there for at least the time being. So what I'd be curious about too is what routines do you do now to kind of keep you stay sharp and kind of keep your edge and keep learning so you can retain that market mastery all the time?
So I think that the number one thing is you've got to be planned. You've got to be on the phone. And then the next thing I think you got to do is you can't read everything, but you got to know like what are the key industry websites and publications in my geography. If it's a geography, what are those? If it's a specific niche, what are those publications? If there's podcasts in that niche, I think those are good to listen to. I always like to ask candidates, hey, what are you reading now? Like, what books are people reading in the industry that they're using? You know, what what uh, what classes or tools or things are new that they're learning about in their side of the industry that I should know about that's coming up? What changes to technology are coming up? I just want to know what's going on, right? Because and I think just being always naturally inquisitive, right? I like to know what's going on in my industry, not just because I want it for making deals, but I like my industry and I like learning about what different building technologies are coming up. And I like being able to ask candidates about those things, whether it's cross laminate. I'm going to bore people to death right now, but cross laminated timber, building a whole, multi-story building out of timber, as opposed to just doing like, the old school wood frame where you can only go up so many stories. I'm like, how do you do that? Like, how do you figure out the load? I think just being a naturally curious person makes a good recruiter and then makes them stay sharp. I think it's when you lose that curiosity and inquisitiveness and passion for having that, uh, uh, that you lose your edge, in my opinion. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one really underrated skill for like building true mastery, that is really overlooked is, like you said, is being able to be on the phone with someone and not be transactional. I think, like, for example, if I were to switch industries tomorrow, right? And what would I do for the first 30 days? The first thing I would do is I'd look at the top, I might use ChatGPT, but I would use the top 10 companies in that space that I want to be in, and I would find all of the executives at those companies and
Right,
I would try to recruit them. Not for a specific job. Like, the testament to a good recruiter, I think, is being able to, talk with someone for 10, 15 minutes, get all the information on them that you need, and then not share an opportunity, right? If you can get to that point, that would be huge because odds are if you're starting into a new industry, you're probably going to be recruiting from the biggest companies in that space. So you
right,
might as well get to know the people in that area. I'm recruiting people now that I interacted with at some point 10, 12 years ago. And they're in totally different space now. They're a totally different level, but they remembered me, and now they're in a situation where I can recruit them for a higher level position as they did before. And so that's the first thing I would do is I would look at who is in that space. I would connect with them, like you said, get them on the phone, have those kind of rounded conversations, and those touch points at some point will pay off because you'll be
right.
able to maybe market them. You get really lucky and you find someone who doesn't like their job anymore, and you can put them somewhere to a smaller company. And so that's really where I would start. And I think that's really an underrated skill for kind of building true market mastery. I would be curious from you too, like if you were to, if a recruiter were to ask you, like, what could they do this week to become more of an expert? Like, what's the one thing that you would have them do that would separate them at least marginally over the next week or so?
So I think it would be once again on the phone, but I would ask everybody on the phone. I would have like a three-ring conversation with them. I would focus on, tell me about you, Mr. Candidate. Tell me about your company. What are you working on? What's your current thing, task, project, X, whatever. Tell me about your company. How is the company doing? What initiatives are going on? Tell me about what new projects are coming up, what new products, anything, right? What about hiring? What type of hiring are you guys doing right now? What about your team? Are you guys hiring for anything? Tell me about, have you seen anybody in interviewing lately? Have you seen anybody, leave the company? Why did they leave? Why do you think people leave your company? What does your company do really well? Tell me about what you guys, what gives your company a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And then I'd say in the industry, right? I'd bounce over. Hey, tell me about in the industry. Who are your top competitors in the marketplace? If I was to go and want to go to a trade show, what trade show should I go to, Mr. Candidate? What, at the trade show, what booth should I stop by if I wanted to become an expert in the industry? Which companies do you think are on are heading to the top of the industry now, and which ones do you think are decelerating? Like getting their opinions on stuff like that. Who do you think is a company that is on the rise? Which ones are on the decline? Why do you think that is? How, Mr. Candidate, what do you do to kind of stay up and ahead in the industry and abreast of things going on? What are you reading? I think if you have that 3-ring conversation and script all those questions out and get on the phone and do that and talk to a minimum of 10 to 15 people a day, 75 people a week, you will become an expert pretty fast in that space. That's what I would tell any brand new recruiter, anybody who sat down with me and wanted to talk to me. I would say, let's map out these questions. I want you to get on the phone and I want you to ask them, and don't focus. I want you to focus on trying to recruit the person, but I want you to bounce between these 3, and I want you to get something out of the conversation. And I want you to write that information down, and then I want you to put it into your ATS so that you have it under the company record for posterity. And that's going to become your memory bank, so that when you're going from call to call, you're able to leverage that information, and it'll tell you where you need to go next.
Yeah, no, I mean, the insight you gave is great. I mean, like I said in the beginning, market mastery is my favorite topic. And, I think people that really can hone in on this and have that mindset of how do I get better? How do I learn more? How do I connect with more people? I think that's going to be huge. And I hope people will take away from what we said and really focus on that. So that wraps up really our conversation on market mastery. Marty, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing some insights. I hope people who are listening to this walk away with a better understanding of how to develop deep expertise in your niche and then use it to be a trusted leader in your market. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please sure to subscribe to the Executive Eye and follow us on LinkedIn for more leadership tips, industry insights, and podcast updates. Until next time, thanks so much for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to the Executive Eye by DRI. Stay connected with us for more insights on leadership and industry trends. Follow the Executive Eye on LinkedIn or visit our website at directrecruiters.com. Until next time, keep your eye on executive leadership.